Well, welcome back. It's me, Andrew Eborn, here on the Andrew Eborn Show, appropriately named, and I'm joined by Errol Musk, and we're discussing about coping with divorce and what led to it, and about the change, and a very open and frank discussion, because obviously Errol's been talking about how he's helped others in a similar situation. And you were explaining just last time, Errol, about May and her start of her blossoming model career. Fill me in on how that happened.
Well, May was an exceptionally good-looking girl. Not so at school. I had a funny thing happen. I went to the same high school as she did, and I was quite fortunate. Although why I don't know, with girlfriends, and I happened to have the girlfriend that everybody wanted at the school, and she was an exceptionally pretty Dutch girl,
What was her name?
and Jackie van Dijk, and she was absolutely beautiful, and she loved me, and I was just a kid. But anyway, I didn't quite get this girlfriend thing when I was at school. I was far happier with my friends. Although there was the occasion when you needed the girlfriend on the weekends or at parties and stuff. And those days, boyfriend and girlfriend was not really, it was a kissing and holding hands thing. It wasn't, you know, it was serious. I mean, it was upmarket, or what do you want to call it? Nice way of putting it. Anyway, the thing is, I decided this is nonsense. I don't need to have her complaining all the time. So I said, I'm done with this. You see, and I was at school, and I was in the library. I was in the last year of school, grade 12, and she was in grade 11, I believe. And I was told she's outside in the quadrangle with all the thousands of other children. And I went out, and she handed me my letters and my pictures and all that sort of stuff, and then she burst into tears and ran away. And this beautiful girl that everybody just couldn't take their eyes off, you see, she was like something unbelievable to look at. But at any rate, I then decided, well, I don't know. I just turned around, walked back to the library. Of course, I was wearing my blazer and my tie and my long pants and all that. I was very smart. I was the chief librarian after all. And I got this tap on my shoulder, on this shoulder, and I turned around, and the next thing I saw, four fingers folded up, heading towards my face. that was the last thing I remember. And I woke up under a tap with blood running down into a water tap, with blood running down into the drain, with my head under the tap, being held under the tap by a bunch of other boys. And what had happened was some other bloke had thought and we had some pretty tough guys in our school, had thought I needed this, you see. And so cut quickly to say what happened was he was taken off, and I was told he's going to be thrown out of the school. I then, as I was a senior pupil at the school, I went and said to the headmaster, please don't do this. He's no harm. No. As it happened, he'd been told to wait after school, and he was from a less well-off part of the town, and in fact he lived in a hotel. His parents were immigrants, and he was sort of doing that hotel thing, and so he was in the center of town, and he'd missed his bus because he'd been told he had to wait after school to get his marching orders, and he didn't get his marching orders. And I had a motorbike, so I said to him, look, let me take you on the back of my motorbike back to town. And Jeffrey Oosthuizen, his name was, and he was very nice, and we became great friends after that.
But why did he hit you? Why did he hit you?
Well, he felt Jackie was a girl that everybody just adored.
Right.
She was, I think she was the incoming head girl. She was, the captain of some or other sports team, I think basketball or something, baseball, not basketball, softball, netball.
Right.
And she was very popular, and so on. And so he thought this was just unacceptable. And I needed a blow to the head to fool this, you see. Anyway, so that's probably why I've been a bit odd ever since. But anyway, But yeah, so bringing May into the picture, I later started taking May out, but I was now out of the school. And as it happened, May and Jackie were in the same class. And so we went to May's prom, what you call the prom, or the matric farewell, we
Right.
called it. And I took May, of course. May at that stage she was from an American family. Her parents were Canadian, or her father was American, but her mother was Canadian. And they were like different sort of people. May made her own clothes, And so, which was quite nice, really, but was not always that great to look at. But anyway, shouldn't say that. But she became quite good with clothes. But anyway, so we went to the matric farewell, and May looked a bit. She made her own dress, so she wasn't as good looking as the other girls. And at the thing, of course, Jackie was the be all and end all of the matric farewell, you see. And Jackie said to the crowd, she said, "I can understand you dropping me, but I can't understand you dropping me for her." Pointing to May, you see. Shame. Anyway, poor May. But May took it quite easily. And so that kind of thing. But yeah, so I forget your question, but we we started going out after that.
Yes.
We were very close after that, May and I.
Yeah.
Oh yes, and
Yeah.
modeling.
Yes.
She did have she was not as thin as she later became. She was a little, no, I wouldn't say overweight. She was a little no, I don't know what the right word is when you're not quite as thin as you should be, or could be.
Right.
And so that had an effect. But as our marriage went on, and she started getting clothes made for her, she started thinning up quite a lot as she got older, and she started looking really good. And she always had a face for photographic modeling, so she did quite a few adverts when she was still a teenager or early in her 20s for Colgate and all that sort of stuff. But when it came to full body modeling, she really came into it when she was about 30 years of age. And I had started having her clothes made by, top couturiers, I think they were called, and Pasquale, who only had the name Pasquale, and Penny Leroy, the big fashionistas of Johannesburg. And Johannesburg in those days, to be quite frank with you, going to London was lovely. And I went to Regine's with May in London, and I went to all sorts of fancy places. In Regine's was the top nightclub, Tokyo Joe's, Strange Fellows, with May, in those days. And but it was always much nicer getting back to Johannesburg.
Right.
Johannesburg was much better food, much better. People were well off, and we had a very good climate. Johannesburg is air conditioned all year round. You don't need air conditioning in Johannesburg.
Right.
Your house doesn't need it. It's there all day, every day. And that has a lot and no winds and no rains, or very little. And so that makes it possible to look quite your best all the time. And so you can imagine, and anyone who, like yourself, who went to Johannesburg in those days would have said, I can't wait to get back.
Right.
Because having a lunch at one of Main Street's gold mining magnate restaurants was like a dream come true. I compare that to having lunch at St. James Palace Hotel or something in St. James Square, where you paid for every potato. They brought you a potato, you paid for it. Could I have another boiled potato, please? That'll be £10. But, anyway, so we had the best of the best. And anyway, so May started doing shows with these people. And of course, people just fell over themselves over her. And pretty soon she was asked to model for the Sunday Times when it was Marilyn Monroe's something or other anniversary of her passing, or something to that effect. So they put her on the cover of the magazine as Marilyn Monroe. And so she really looked good. And this started having an effect on her where, she started moving towards a crowd that I didn't particularly find very entertaining. And that was really what happened. And
what didn't you like about the crowd? Tell me a bit more about the crowd.
Well, it's that arty sort of crowd. The men all look down on you. They're not the kind of men that I was used to. The type of men I was used to were, your buddies. I mean, they'd come and fetch you at 1 o'clock in the morning. You know, I mean, if you happen to phone them and say I'm stuck in a mud patch or something in 1 o'clock in the morning somewhere, they would drive 100 miles to come and get you. You know, I mean, those were my friends. Yeah.
Right.
And of course, I was flying a lot of flying, and flying can be quite rigorous. May, of course, always had a long distance telephone with her when we went flying, you know, so she could call Canada and such like from the aeroplane. You know, it was a big tin. And so she would have this big tin and she would go, and then Canada would call back. Anyway, she didn't like flying. And so I would, of course, force her to fly, and we would fly to all sorts of places around Africa. And I wouldn't say I forced her. She just came with. You know, I didn't say you have to, but I mean, just accepted that she was going to come with. And, you know, so I also liked sailing on the ocean, and she didn't like that at all. And she was motion sickness was a problem for her. And so in general, our lives started to diverge. And the kind of people in the modeling world, of course, if you get to know them and everything, they're very nice, but they're very, and they think a hell of a lot of themselves. They're very opinionated, and they're not at all like your friends. You know, they're sort of a catty bunch, and of course, being with them is wonderful because they make wonderful food and they have wonderful do's. So you know, to be in their crowd is just absolutely great. But at the same time, it's a different kind of crowd.
Did you find it? Did you find it shallow?
Well, I wouldn't say. I thought no. I think they were probably far more deeper people than I suppose. Than me, I didn't think that they were shallow. I think they had much more understanding of art and theatre and all that sort of stuff than I did. I was more like a bumbling sort of bloke with them. You know, I put on my best suit to try and sort of fit in when I visited with them, when I was with them. You know, but my best suit looked like a pair of looked like a boiler suit for a plumber compared to the way these guys dressed.
So you were starting to feel uncomfortable with that crowd. Is that right? But they didn't.
Yeah, I never felt comfortable.
Did they not try and make? What I always think, Errol, is that you try and make everybody feel comfortable and try and make them feel good. I mean, you've got a great taste in art. I always talk about your Moreau behind you and things like that.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But you're genuine, and what I love about it, and all the feedback that I get from people is that they love listening to you because you say it from the heart. And if you're mixing with a crowd where you think they're sort of putting on the airs and graces and a bit pretentious, is that a fair summary?
No, yes, I suppose, but it's not that they put on; it's the way they are, you know. And you know, I mean, you take Pasquale. I mean, he was world famous. And he'd come out here from Spain, and he was doing Johannesburg's couture. I mean, he was terribly expensive, and he would, you know, sort of tell me what she has to wear, you know. And also, they had a very great wit about them. So if you were in their functions at their parties, they were like terribly witty all the time, you know. And it was hard to keep up with their wit, you know. And it was hard to sort of feel smooth among them. They're all terribly smooth, if you know what I mean. And you know, they were all. I'm not musical at all, so and many of them were top musicians, you know.
But the best people though, Errol. I mean, it's you make a very interesting point because it's all about people drifting apart, and as you say, it's a different crowd. And May was going that direction. You didn't feel comfortable there. I deal with people from around the world, and the nicest people are those who will talk to anybody and make them feel like a celebrity, even when they're not a celebrity. And to make people feel comfortable is a real skill, isn't it?
Now, the art people are not like that. They will say to you, if you arrive there, and as I say, my best suit, I didn't dress like you. That's why I look at that suit and I say, oh, I should have had that. But at any rate, I would go in my best suit, which is probably the drabbest grey suit you can imagine, which has worked very well for the engineering office, you know, for meetings with banks and things like that. Because if I pitched up looking like you, they'd say, you know, what is this guy? He's some sort of, you know, who is he? You know, too fancy for them, you know. They don't want that. So when I went in my sort of best suit, which was very drab, you know, I would sometimes, I remember one girl saying to me, she was one of the top people, one of the top women in fashion in South Africa. And I remember her. And she was married to a guy who ran the biggest, best hair salon for men in England.
Right.
And he had this very famous name. I forget what his name was. But anyway, and she said to me, "What are you doing here? Who are you?"
Oh.
One evening. I said, "I'm May's husband." "Oh," she said. And she walked off. You know, that's how they are. They're not trying to make you feel good at all. And no, there's nothing wrong with that. You have to catch up.
Well, I mean, you say you're too generous, Errol. I think there is something wrong with that, and as I say, I mix with those arty folk as well. And the ones that I find genuine are the ones who actually think about other people, have got a bit of empathy. And I always say, if you prick me, do I not bleed? If you tickle me, do I not laugh? But beneath the surface, everybody's the same. We have the same difficulties, the same foibles, and things like that.
But the interesting thing with them is that I did have the need. I'd like to be like them. I'd like to be as smooth as they are. And that I would like to dress as smooth as they are. I'd like to have the witty. A lot of them were in advertising, you know, which is also an art world. And they were copywriters. So they had this built-in phrases and things to say that were all so Oscar Wilde-ish, if you understand what I mean.
Yes, of course.
So terribly smart to say things, you know, where you were fumbling to even say good evening. They were just dishing out.
I get it, but you're very eloquent. You could fit within those crowds. I mean, Elon at the moment. Yeah, well, but Elon at the moment, when it's going through that sort of, how old was he while this was all happening?
Well, he was a child then. Right. He was a young boy. He's living with me. But Elon is typically exactly like me, and even today, he struggles in company like that. He struggles tremendously in company like that. I mean, years ago when we were in Bel Air, which is the top suburb of LA, I would call it the top suburb, the best suburb, you know. And he had a home there, and his neighbor was Quincy Jones, and we would go to Quincy Jones for evenings, and they'd have all these people there that you can't imagine. Diana Ross, I think it was one of Quincy Jones' ex-wives. I'm not even sure, but anyway, Natasha Skinsky and Quincy Jones and Diana Ross and all these super famous people that you'd only seen on screen. And Elon and I would be there. I was there on one or two occasions. Quincy was wonderful. I mean, he would keep me. He would if he saw I was uncomfortable, he'd sit with me, face me, right opposite me, just as I'm talking to you. He'd ignore everybody else, talk to me the whole evening. That was Quincy Jones.
Yeah, and that's my point, Errol, that people who are classy, that's what I would call class,
but he was
make everybody feel comfortable.
But he was the top of the tops. But generally speaking, talking about Elon in those companies, he always felt like a bull in a china shop. Never quite could. And it's still like that with him today. And I prefer that. Kimball, on the other hand, my younger son, he fits in. If you see pictures of him, you'll understand the way he dresses and everything. You can see he just slipped into that like oil into another oil. You know, I mean, he was just for him, it's the easiest world imaginable. Kimball. But not Elon.
Not him. Well,
Elon
it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned that Elon didn't really like that world, but a couple of his...
he liked it. He loved it. But he couldn't... He was always caught off. He could never come up with some perfect answer, you know. Oh, you're looking whatever tonight to him. And he would want to say back, I like the way you dress too, or something.
Right.
He never quite got around it.
And yet Elon's been associated with, he's gone out and had children with a number of famous people in the arts world.
He's trying to get there.
Amber Heard and Grimes come to mind. How did he fit in with that sort of world?
Well, yes, he's tried. I think Amber was a very good, as my daughter's told me, I bumped into her once, but the girls knew her. My daughters knew her very well, very, very well. I mean, they spent weekends with her. And so they told me she's a very, very down-to-earth girl, just like South African girls, because she comes from Texas. So she's very much like a South African girl. But you must remember, Amber Heard is not drop-dead gorgeous. Among the drop-dead gorgeous women, she's drop-dead gorgeous. So if you've got 1,000 drop dead gorgeous women, then you get Amber Heard, you know. So it's very difficult. And so she's got men and people around her like just speechless. So now you put Elon there, he's totally speechless, doesn't know what to say. And so that I always thought that would be a very good couple to for him, you know. But anyway, it's very difficult. It's difficult for people like Amber Heard as well, because she also has a career. She also has a persona. She can't give up her persona like May did for me in her 20s. May did that for me. But Amber is not in a position, not able to do that. When people are absolutely lathering at the mouth over you all the time, you know, what can you do? Anyway, so for Elon, it's also been very, very difficult. But I must just go on and say that after May and I were divorced, about a year later, I happened to bump into, at a very fancy function, the South Africa's top fashion model, who had been South Africa's top fashion model. And she was a British girl who'd come out here called Susan Wilson. And she had been a top model in England, or she actually had been living in Saudi Arabia or something, or someplace, or Beirut or something like that. Anyway, the point is, she came to South Africa for some reason. I can't remember why. I think it was for modeling. And she became South Africa's top model. On television, she was Badadas girl. She was All Over girl. She was Nedbank girl, which is one of the big banks. She was Macro girl, which is a big outfit selling things. She was on everybody on television. And she was one of the few models I met who actually made enough money to buy her own home, her own car, her own everything. And she was really, really beautiful, incredibly photogenic. She was Pentax girl worldwide. And I met her, started going out, and we married. And she was in that same sort of crowd. I battled enormously to try and fit in with her crowd. I just could not fit in with her crowd. And I could tell you stories. It was just so odd, the things that happened. You know, you just can't, you have to be really, really be in that crowd from the beginning to be able to, you know, there was a hardcover book made of her by Gervais, who was the top fashion photographer of Johannesburg. He made a book of her, a big hard-covered book, just of pictures of Sue. And I was once at a function years later, and with Tony Bloom, and he inherited Tiger Foods, which is a company listed on the London Stock Exchange.
Yes.
And he had married the daughter of von Mellencamp, who was Hitler's chief of staff. And he had married her, and I seem to remember her name was Gisela. Well, I'm not sure, but I think it was Gisela. Anyway, on one occasion, I was dating a girl whose father had built several, she was from Europe, several casinos in Africa, including the one in Swaziland. And she took me to this function and at Tony Bloom's place. And Tony Bloom had this palace. And we went down from his palace with all these women in long dresses and men in tuxedos and so forth. And we went into the pool room where the big party was to be held. And in the room, as I walked in, against the wall, was a picture about 4 times larger than the one behind you. And it was a picture of a woman's face with a hat on. And it was a picture of Sue.
Right.
And everybody was marveling at this picture, you see, which had been made as big as a billboard. And Tony Bloom was telling people, this is some or other fashion model from Dubai or something like, I don't know what he was selling them. And like an idiot, I said, no, that's my ex-wife, and she lives in Yeovil, which is just up the road. You know, luckily I don't think many people heard me, but anyway, yeah. So it didn't last with me and Sue. I couldn't take the crazy behavior. I just couldn't take it.
Right.
I couldn't take it. These
when
people
you
are
say crazy behavior, I mean, again, it's the same crowd, isn't it? Where they sort of, unlike Quincy Jones, who was clearly very classy and made you feel very welcome at the parties. The point I was making beforehand is that from any walk of life, and as you do, probably, I deal with all sorts of people, whether it's royalty or celebrities or whatever. I always think the genuine people are those who make somebody else feel comfortable.
Of course, but certainly the Tony Bloom crowd was very much my sort of crowd. I mean, they were, the sort of I fitted in. I enjoyed that. I mean, they were better upbringings than I did, but at that stage, I fitted in very well with them, and so I had no problem there. But the art world that Sue had come from, I found very, very difficult to deal with. I couldn't understand it. On one occasion we were invited by, again, an art group, the very biggest advertising agency in South Africa, which was also in England and everything. And we went to this thing, and they were, oddly enough, this crowd of about 10 to 14 people were more interested in me than anybody else at the table. I don't know why, because why I would have been interesting in 1982 or something, I don't know. But apparently I was. And they were talking to me, and I was trying to answer everybody. And Sue was with me. And Sue used to dress very differently. So she wore sort of Batman outfit to that function. well, not the head, but the cat suit and the flowing robes and the silk see-throughs. And I don't know. She was incredibly good looking. And she had this beautiful golden blonde hair. Anyway, so I never noticed that she wasn't at the table. I was trying to talk to everybody, and I was tapped on the shoulder by the hostess, the head of BBDO's wife. And she asked me if I wouldn't mind going to the kitchen. So I went to the kitchen, and she said, can I follow her? So I sort of followed her. We went up this mansion, had several levels, and we wound up in, 1.5 level up, and then another 1.5 level up. And we wound up in a bedroom, a large bedroom, this huge bedroom. And we went into the bathroom, dressing room, and then into a bathroom. And there in the bath was Sue, having a bath with her hair, washing her hair. So I said, what? I don't know what to say. And she said, hello, darling, type of thing, And anyway, cut a long story short, I said, well, and she came back, and then she came down dressed again. She thought the company was incredibly dull, you see. So she thought, well, what the hell? I'll go to have a bath. And so she came down from these people, through these people, and dressed all again with her flowing chiffon and everything. She said, hello, everyone. Good night. And I said, I think we better leave. So we left. But it was kind of difficult, because all these advertising people are quite arty, and they're all very good with their repartee.
Yes.
Everyone's got one says something, the other one repartees back, and then that one repartees back, and it's like a competition. Yes. Who gets the last repartee? I'm not good at that, and they were like sort of like nonplussed by Sue, And I said to her afterwards, I said, she said, oh, they're so dull, Errol. They're so dull, So I said, yeah, but you gotta have, what am I supposed to do? I can't say no, I don't know. But I couldn't handle it anymore, and eventually I said, no, I can't do this anymore.
Right. Do you remember the day that you sort of turned around and said, look, I can't do this anymore? Was it you you made that decision? Did you?
Oh, with Sue. Yes, I told her I can't do this anymore, and she wasn't happy with it, and she said no, she wants me to try. So we tried for about a year, but we sort of both got tired of it, and I just said I don't want to do this anymore, and I couldn't take her friends, I couldn't handle it, because they were always in some or other crisis. I don't know if you know that about it.
Everything's a disaster.
Not a disaster. There was some sort of crisis.
A drama or a crisis. Okay.
Drama, a crisis.
Yeah.
It's that kind of world, They're very emotional, and if they didn't get a part in a theater or something like that, and then they would, they were very emotional people, very arty people. If you spend time with them, and you didn't seem to understand who they were, And you seem to be the solid sort of person who didn't, for them at any rate, who didn't seem to have crises, which I did have, of course. They sort of found you irritating. You were supposed to have a crisis. I mean, if you had a crisis, they could all rally round you, and sort of share your crisis, if you understand what I mean. Because sharing a crisis would fill a week or a few days, so and so's in a crisis, and then there was also the question of drugs, which was very difficult to handle because, I've never had the need for something that lifts me or drops me or all that sort of stuff, and unfortunately, these people do have that need. So, so and so would be on a sort of recovery, another one would be on it would have gone back on or back off or back on, or I don't know. Anyway, I just thought, no, I don't need this. I don't need this. So I got out of it.
And did you get out of it as quickly as the May situation? Because you say that all
Oh,
happened
yes. No, emotionally,
in
I
a
wasn't
week.
as wrapped up as that. May and I
Right.
had been together, I don't know, since she was 10 years old.
Yeah.
May was like my other half. So it was very hard, and she still is in a way. So it was very hard to break up with May. I found it very hard. I felt I'd lost something. It was like losing your right arm or something, and your right leg. So it was like hopping around on having only one arm and one leg for a long time. And she was just she handled all the money. She handled the children. She handled everything, the catering. She was the most perfect wife a man could ever even imagine. May. But she gave up her whole life to be number two.
Right.
So remember, everywhere we went, I was number one, she was number two.
Right.
And that's not too good. And then afterwards, she was number one always, So it's something that a person. And also, there's another thing, a story I can tell. Some years after May and I were divorced, I used to try golf. I don't know if you ever tried it. It's very hard.
Yes. I used to represent Toyota doing the match play, so you would do the
Oh, you're
sponsorship deals for
kidding?
that sort of stuff. Yes, did
Oh,
all
well,
that.
that's good. I was never that good. I would struggle, but I could hit the ball, but I was never focused enough, And they also told me I have to play 3 times a week if I'm going to get anywhere. And I didn't have that time. I just didn't have that time. But at any rate, I was once with my golfing buddies, and being a city council, I had free access to 2 golf clubs. I was a member by automatic, it was like, because I was a city councillor. Anyway, so we're at this golf club, and there were a bunch of us there, and they were terrific chaps. And we were talking about things, and a couple of them had been divorced. I'd been divorced, and a couple of them were single, and they were having no girlfriend or girlfriend problems or no girlfriend problems. And in came a chap, and I remember his name was DeVille. And he came in, he had this sort of surname that had become his first name, DeVille. And he came in, and DeVille was there, and he was married, and he'd been married for 18 years, you see. So somebody, not me, I know it was me, we started talking, and then we said to him, he was always leaving early to be home, and, he hadn't played with us that day. And he came in, and somebody said to him, DeVille, you have such a happy marriage. You're such a lucky bastard. You have such a lucky marriage, and you're such a happy. How do you do it? You've got it made. And DeVille turned to us and he said to us, with a very sincere look, because we never really discussed this with him before, because men don't talk about that kind of thing. And he said, "What?" He said, "I have to work on my marriage every single day. I work on my marriage every single day." And nobody could understand what he was saying. And they said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I work on my marriage every day, every single day. I'm looking at my watch, worried about my marriage every single day, I didn't put it like that. I don't think he said that I don't do something that will upset the marriage. He didn't put it like that. But he said, I work on my marriage, as I recall it, I work on my marriage every single day. That was the gist of what he said.
Right.
And we were all like, oh, we didn't. We didn't work on our marriage every single day.
Well,
I remember when I was married to May, I used to have work all over the country, and I flew a very fast twin-engine aircraft. So I could just about be anywhere in the country whenever I wanted to be. sometimes I would get a call to go out to something, and sometimes it would be a pipeline or it would be something. But inevitably, with engineering things, when you got to a place, you were met by the top guys there, and the top guys would say, while you're here, because they always, in the middle of the desert or something, would always have a fantastic golf course, for example, or whatever. And they say, let's have aren't you staying for a round? You have to have one of our steaks, so on. And then it would get to, well, why don't you just stay over? And anyway, I'll put you up at our place anyway, so you may as well stay over. I would do this. And in those days, there were no cell phones. So I couldn't phone May and say, I'm not going to be back, And for far as she knew, I head off in an airplane. I could be dead.
Right.
Her father and brother-in-law were killed in an air crash. So I never bothered to even phone her. So a day or so later, I might get to a phone and put through a call, because of course it was a big black thing, and you'd phone and you'd have to phone, know all the way to do it and everything. Sometimes it was a switchboard, and then say, oh, I'd be back home. I think tomorrow. I think I'll be back tomorrow. And she'd say, okay, and that wasn't right. You see, it wasn't right to do that kind of thing. Years later, as I was saying to you earlier on another interview with my second wife in Malibu, when I started doing the same thing at SpaceX, spending all my time at SpaceX, from getting there at 6:30 in the morning and leaving at 10 o'clock or 9:30 or 9 o'clock at night at the sort of thing every day, including weekends, by the way. My second wife said, if you carry on doing this, I'm going to commit suicide. It was like she said it in a sort of fit. But I mean, it was more like to tell me, you better stop doing this. She didn't try to commit suicide.
It's worrying. But I think it's interesting, Errol.
No, she didn't say I'm going to commit suicide. She said I'm going to kill myself if you keep on doing
this. A nightmare. As you say, that people working on their marriage every day. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about life after Sue and life after May and how you cope. But for now, Errol, thank you for joining me.
Okay.